Alright, well in our last video, if you watched it, we set up a DOS VM in preparation for our Windows VM. Now, I had some thoughts between then and now, and I'm thinking, well, I'll show you something else here. I'm going to go ahead and take this VM and I'm going to do something called a clone. See that right here? Hit that button, clone. And actually, in the last video I warned you about changing the MAC address because otherwise you'll have network issues. Well, that's what I'm going to do right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. Click Next. Be a full clone. I don't want a linked one. I don't want to link to the original hard drive. I want to make a full clone which has its own hard drive and all that good stuff. So we'll clone it. Boom, and that's it. Now I have a clone of my original VM, and I'm going to go ahead and change the settings because what I really want to use it for is DOS. So we'll do that, and let's see. Yeah, we'll call it Windows anyway. Doesn't matter. We'll keep everything else the same. Maybe turn on the audio or something, and say OK. So that little trick's done. Also, this kind of lets me illustrate the point of the kind of context thing. See, if I do settings, I'm getting settings for DOS VM. If I click up here, I'm getting settings for the Windows. That seems simple, but if you have a lot of VMs in this list over here, you can screw it up. So anyway, let's get going. We have our little VM here, and we have Windows, and so let's see if we can start that. We'll go ahead and do that. And of course, we're not really going to get into Windows right yet because we haven't installed it yet. Remember when I said it was going to get painful? This is where it gets painful. Now, we should have an A drive. Let's see if we got anything there. Yep. There is our A drive that is a virtual drive that contains an image of the DOS installation disk that this VM is actually running on. We have an R disk, which is our CD-ROM. Of course, we don't have anything in there right now. Actually, what do we have? So we'll go back to C. Now, first thing is, well, you say, how am I going to possibly install Windows now? I need the disk. Well, yes, you do. So what we're going to do is we're going to go find the disk. Now, we've already set up this VM, and there's some pertinent things to remember here. They'll be grayed out since it's running, but we see that we've turned off the virtualization, only one processor. Try to keep everything as low level as possible for these older DOS and Windows operating systems or they get screwed up. So everything's okay there. But we're going to go into devices, and what we're going to do is we're going to load a different image. And what the process is basically is going through and constantly changing the image here that's loaded on the floppy device, which is actually seems a little easier than, say, changing CD-ROMs in VMware or something like that, which we'll do that as well. But we're going to go find our floppy disk file here, and they go right to my directory where I put them. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here and go to the setup disk. I'm going to say open. Okay. Now we'll check, and yep, we see the check mark. That's the one that's active. So we'll go ahead and go back, go into our A drive. We'll say setup. And you see we're starting the Windows for Workgroups setup. So now we'll continue. And we can do an express setup. Okay, now we see it wants disk 2. So we're going to have to, since we're trapped in this thing, we're going to have to hit the right control button again to get our mouse cursor free. Go to our floppy device. And we're going to change to a different floppy image. Disk 2. We'll go back in here. We'll hit return. And you see we're already into Windows setup. It's happy. Now it's going to try to detect network code. We're going to worry about this stuff later. We're not even going to try to set this up now because Windows 3.1 is not going to be able to set up anything like sound cards or anything like that. Okay, my full name. Okay, I'll be user, and my company will be org, and my product number I don't care about. So continue. Yeah. Okay, so we want disk 3. So we're going to go up here again to our devices, and we'll load up disk 3 from our menu here. Get back into the window, say OK. and it's going to go ahead and read off that disk. Yes, this would be easier with the CD-ROM, but like I said, this is the most painful way to do it, and that's the way we're going to do it. Pick another drive here, and I don't expect you to sit here and watch through this entire thing, so I just want to give you the gist of it. Get back in there. I'm just going to read disk 4. Now it wants disk 5. Okay, when we get to this point, like I said, I'm not going to install any printers or anything like that. We're going to go right past this, and we'll just continue past that. You see it's building, and we don't need the tutorial. Now it's going to ask for a restart, so we'll go ahead and do that. And it's just like a Control-Alt-Delete, so you put a high mount system there. Now remember, Windows didn't used to automatically start, so we'll put that, we'll just type Win. And there we go, we've got Windows. Unfortunately, we don't have much of anything. It's 16 colors, 640 by 480, pretty ugly. Now, you're going to spend a whole lot of time and energy trying to find drivers that are for a 20-year-old operating system if you don't follow these next few steps I'm going to do here. Seemed pretty easy, but it took a lot longer than that to get to this point, so believe me, it took a lot longer. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get out of the context of Windows, and we're going to go ahead and mount up a CD image. And what we're going to do is, I found one called the Windows 3.1 pack. What this thing contains is the drivers that let the network card work, that let some TCP drivers, other stuff like that work. So we're going to go ahead and do that and mount it. Now, remember, in Windows, everything, there isn't really as a My Computer, it's in File Manager. So we're going to look in File Manager, and we're going to see if we can see. There's A, there's C. Okay, so what we're going to have to do now is we're going to have to go ahead and restart, because Windows doesn't automatically find new devices. There is no plug and play in Windows 3.1. So we'll go ahead and exit. And we'll exit Windows. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and send this to Control-Alt-Delete. Before we do that, we'll make sure, yep, our 3.1 pack ISO is mounted. So we'll have a machine, and we're going to send a Control-Alt. Okay, we're back in our VM here. And before we launch into this, I want to show you a couple little changes I made. If you want Windows to load automatically and you want your CD-ROM drive to be available, you're going to have to make these changes in the AutoExec and config sys. So first we'll look at config sys, because that's got the meat. You see we got the files and the buffers, but we also have the MSCDEX, those CD-ROM drivers here. You need this line if you want to see your CD in Windows or in anything. In AutoExec BAT, real simple. There's the MSCDEX. I set the path, and then Win, so this thing automatically starts Windows when I start the VM. So, because I got used to that. All right, I'm going to send this thing a Control-Alt-Delete, and you're going to see this come up. Okay, we're starting. There's the CD-ROM driver loading. There we're into Windows. Okay, good. Now, we're in Windows, but we got no networking, nothing going on here. It's not too exciting. So what we need to do is we need to go to Windows Setup. We'll go to Options and change Network Settings. Now, we're going to need to pick networks, and generally the default is fine. You don't have to do anything special here. And sharing, I like to share stuff because then I can be seen on the network, and that's kind of the idea. Drivers, this is where it gets different. We're going to add an adapter. But it's not going to be in this list. We're going to have to go off our little disk that we found a little earlier here. There's a disk I've mounted in the CD-ROM, and it's called the 3.1 pack. And what this has is basically all the drivers for Windows 3.1 so you can run in a virtual machine. Now the driver is going to be an AMD PCNet for Windows for Workgroups. We'll load that driver. And we'll say OK. And OK again. So now we've got the driver. And I generally like to close here and let it restart. It's going to ask you, usually this will be user or work group, user here, work group here, and then usually user again here. I've set my local subnets work group name here, plus I've changed the computer name to WW311. So we'll say OK. And I'm going to go ahead and replace all the files. So I'm going to say, OK, disk 7. OK, we'll break out of here, and we'll go to the devices, floppy, and we'll mount our disk 7, which is already in our short list here. We'll get back in the VM and say OK. And it's going to load all that good stuff. Now it wants disk 8, so we're going to do that. We're going to go to devices again, floppy. I told you this was painful. Disk 8. Get back into our VM and say OK. Now it wants the PCNet adapter. That's fine. We can actually browse for that one because we already have the CD-ROM mounted and the VM knows about it. So we check that. Say OK. And OK again. And it's going to want to restart. We'll let it. And you can see that the network's running because down here in your little status window, you see network activity. See here? Whenever there's hard drive activity, CD, whatever, you see activity, little blip. So that means it's working. And we're getting prompted for a password. That's awesome. Now we're not going to give it one. And before we go in, I want to show you something here real quick in the settings. If we look at network, okay, see I got this is one of my adapters that's actually on my machine. But it's a little more important than I thought it was. The adapter type, I originally had this set to pair virtualization. That didn't work at all. Windows didn't know what to do with that. So I set it to this PCNet. So basically this is the first adapter in the adapter type that was in the list for advanced. I picked it, kept it, and it worked. So just a little note there that if you keep getting failures when you're setting up your Windows for Workgroups network on your VM and everything else looks right, check here. Check your adapter type and try a different type because chances are that's the problem. Okay, we'll get out of there and we'll go back to our VM. Get in there. Now I'm not going to put any usernames or passwords yet. Nah, I don't need a password file yet. Let's see what I have now. I have network. I have logon. I have NetWatcher, which is kind of dumb. So, you know, I can do all this nifty stuff with the network. Win pop-up. Win meter. I really don't want to use the memory for this. Anyway, we have network. Now, we're not done though. We're only talking, remember, we're only talking about, let me close this, talking on 2 protocols. We're talking on NetBEUI and IPX, which who cares about IPX? I haven't been a Novell server in 10 years. So there's something else we need to do. We need to add another network. So what we're going to do, in the drivers, we're going to add, well, actually we need to add another protocol, not a network. So we're going to add a protocol, unlisted, and guess where we're going to find that? We're going to go on the CD. And what we want is TCP32B from our little source diskette, and I'll get you, you'll see the path to that where I found this below. We'll say OK. And OK again. There's the TCP IP. Say OK. Yeah, we'll let it replace. And bang zoom, all of a sudden we've got TCP IP. So we'll close. Say OK. And see if it's working, we know it's working, then we see that it actually brings up the IP configuration dialog. We'll say enable. Yes, and that way it should pick up an address and say OK, OK, and we'll restart. We're loading our CD-ROM driver. Here comes Windows, and you can see our network is busy. Tick, 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 tick. Good. We don't want that. Okay. Now we've got IP. So we have a FTP client, a Telnet client, all this nifty stuff. Let's see if I can get to something here. I'm going to try to connect 68. There we go. I'm actually talking to my firewall. So we know IP is working. Disconnect. We'll exit that. We can also tell it's working if we go to a DOS prompt here, and we'll ping my firewall. And we're getting replies. Whoopee! So we know that IP is working. What we don't have is a browser, and who cares? So there you go. That's pretty much it. We've got Windows for Workgroups installed and running. It's happy. And we've got networking, so we can actually go out and be seen. Okay, so we have the networking set up. Let's actually see if we can go and browse the network. We go through File Manager here normally. So we'll just go right into File Manager. And normally see Windows and everything else that's mounted up. What we're going to do is we're actually going to go to the tree view or the disk view, connect a network drive, and look at that. It's showing us all the available shares on our little network, a little work group. So let's see what's on NetVault. Oh, NetVault has all kinds of shares available for us. Well, that's cool. Let's see what's in video. It'd be funny if you could actually read the video, wouldn't it? You can see 3.8. Windows isn't good at long file names. So, yeah, there's that. But anyway, you were actually looking at a network resource through Windows 3.1. It's actually an NSA drive, and we can actually map it, like I actually have a drive mapped here to backups plus one to the photo volume. So, and we got one to video. So every time we connect, we're going to have D, E, and F. But in any case, that's networking. That's it in a nutshell. So you have functional Windows on a VM, and it looks fair. Anyway, that's it. That's Windows for Workgroups running in a VM, Painful Edition. Thanks for watching. I'm out.